Welcome to our presentation on Sherpa. We will use the Sherpa method to break down the task of trekking in Nepal. This board will track our progress as we climb through the 9 steps of Sherpa.
Good morning, sir.
Hi, I'm looking for Sherpa to go mountain climbing today.
See, have you considered where you'd like to go?
No, I just want to go mountain climbing. It can't be that hard.
So you haven't prepared at all. You just kind of winging it.
Yeah, I wanted to go mountain climbing.
I see. Well, speaking from personal experience, that is a recipe for disaster. So what I think you should do is let me be your Sherpa and guide you through Sherpa, otherwise known as systematic human error reduction and prediction approach.
Sherpa say what?
Okay, see, that's very confusing because there are 2 different explanations for Sherpa. The first of which being a guide who will lead you on a trek or mountain climber if you'd like to go, such as myself. And the second is a method used in ergonomics known as Sherpa, in which you break down the task at hand. You analyze all the different problems that could go wrong potentially, and then you produce solutions to every problem that you come up with.
Okay, so where do we start?
There are 9 steps to Sherpa. Step 1, HTA. Step 2, task classification. Step 3, identify likely errors. Step 4, identify consequences. Step 5, recovery. Step 6, probability. Step 7, criticality. Step 8, remedial measures. And step 9, review and refine analysis. Step 1, HTA.
The first step of Sherpa analysis is to conduct a hierarchical task analysis, also known as an HTA, in which task performance is expressed in a hierarchy of goals. The task begins with an overall goal, which is then broken down into sub-goals and continues to proceed downward until an appropriate termination point is reached.
Step 2, identify types of tasks. Next, the analyst will assign each task identified in the HTA to one of 5 categories. The categories being action, retrieval, check, selection, and information communication. An action is a task like pressing a button or pulling a switch. In terms of mountain climbing, it could include step 2.6.2. After 3,000 meters, climb 300 to 400 meters per day. Climbing is an action in this case. Retrieval is getting information from a screen or manual. In our case, a retrieval step was 1.2.1, getting information from a guidebook by reading the section on climate. The next category is check, like a procedural check. In our trekking example, 2.6 was monitoring height climbed with a barometer. This clearly is a check. Next is selection. For example, choosing one alternative over another. In our case, 3.4.2 was choosing bottled water over alternatives. Lastly, we have information communication. This consists of talking to another party. Step 1.3.1 involved discussing past experience with one's potential guide. Step 3, come up with potential errors. Identify likely errors. For each task you have identified through HTA, determine any corresponding errors. There may be more than one associated error for a task. These errors will fall under the same task classification category as their associated task. For example, An action task will have an action error. These errors can be denoted with a letter, A for action, R for retrieval, etc., and a number for the specific error mode. Here are 5 examples of errors from our analysis which represent each of the task classification categories. Starting with task step 1.2.1, which was Read Guidebook section on climate, we can see that this was identified as a retrieval task. Thus, it will have a retrieval error. The 2 errors we identified were neglect to read guidebook before trip or misread guidebook. The first, neglect to read guidebook before trip, can be classified as an R1 error. This means that information was not obtained. The second, misread guidebook, could be classified as R2. Wrong information obtained. To select the proper external error mode, consult a Sherpa external error mode taxonomy chart.
I don't really get this.
Here is a second example of identifying the errors associated with a task. This is arguably the most important part of the Sherpa analysis, so this is why we are giving a secondary example. Task 3.4.2 was choose bottled water over other types. We classified this as a selection task. Thus, the error will also be a selection error. The error could be select non-bottled water. This error is called an S2 error for error mode, as S2 means wrong selection made. Once again, consult your Sherpa external error mode taxonomy chart to get these specific subtypes.
Who needs bottled water when I got this nice, clean, yellow tap water?
Step 4. Identify consequences.
Consequences. In this step, the analyst must determine what would happen if the error occurred. For each error, provide a short description of the following consequence. For example, with neglecting to read guidebook before trip or misreading guidebook, the consequence would be proceed unprepared.
Why didn't I know it'd be this cold? I should have read the guidebook.
Let's look at a second example of a consequence. For the error, select non-bottled water, the consequence would be altered health status.
Oh, I don't feel so good.
Step 5. Analyze potential for recovery.
This next step requires the analyst to determine the recovery potential of the error. It is recorded as none, immediate, or recorded later on in the task step. In other words, if there is potential for recovery at a future task step, it is entered here. For example, if the error neglect to ask level of experience occurs, there is no recovery.
Step 6. Examine probability of occurrence.
If an error has occurred many times in the past, we identify this as a high probability of occurring. Likewise, if it has occurred a moderate number of times in the past, we classify this as medium, and rarely in the past is recorded as low probability. For this step, it is important to consult a subject matter expert to find out their experience with each error in the past. For example, with the error omit to a check barometer, the probability is medium, meaning that it has occurred fairly often in the past.
Step 7. Examine criticality of error.
Next, the analyst determines the criticality of the error based on a scale of low to high if the error leads to an unresolvable consequence, such as interfering with the success of the task. For example, the error climbing every 400 meters per day is rated as high criticality because the consequences of this error could be severe.
Step 8. Identify remedial strategies.
The last step is remedial strategy. The analyst looks back and makes suggestions of additions or changes to the process such that the errors could be avoided. For the error, neglect to read guidebook before trip or misread guidebook, the remedial strategy could be look at weather reports and read multiple guidebooks.
I think he's going to want to read the section on climate.
Another example of a remedial strategy is that for the error, select non-bottled water. The remedial strategy in this case could be bring a lot of bottled water such that the choice is clear and bottled water is available to make the correct choice.
He really doesn't want to do this.
We'll try this instead.
Step 9. Review and refine analysis.
Alright, so I am here with my good friend Ram. Ram is a guide in Nepal and he has led my family on a couple of treks in the past. And he is going to be our subject matter expert for our Sherpa presentation. So I've already shown Ram our HTA as well as our Sherpa chart outlining our errors, consequences, recovery, and remedial strategies, and he's given some great advice of his own. And now I'm just going to ask him a couple questions about trekking, and he is going to let us know about his experience. So here's Ram.
So how long have you been a guide?
For guiding, it's like 9 years.
9 years, yeah.
Yeah, but I started trekking in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I started as a porter.
Yep.
And someone, from my family member, not my own family, but like a cousin brother, he was doing a trekking on that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he suggested me to do once,
Yep.
And then I agree with him. I went trekking. The first trekking was in Annapurna region called Jomsom Muktinath trek.
Okay.
And yeah, I really enjoyed. I had a really great time, and then I continued trekking. So it's like 2 years
Mm-hmm.
trekking. Yeah.
And where are some of the places that you have led treks to?
I've been the most popular trekking region of Nepal. It's like Everest region, Annapurna region, Langtang,
Mm-hmm.
and some part of other, but I haven't done all the trek like Kanchenjunga, Makkadu, but I've been only in like Annapurna, Everest, Langtang,
Yep.
Manaslu, yes.
What is your favorite one to go on?
Everest Base Camp trek.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, yeah. But I love to go the other region as well. Like Annapurna is really beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure you know why that is beautiful.
Of course. No, I loved
But the
Annapurna,
Everest is-
so.
Yeah, but the Everest is my favorite. Everest Base Camp, Everest region especially.
I'll have to try that one next time I come over.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah,
Definitely.
Everest Base Camp next time.
Yeah, for sure. And then what is the worst experience you have run into while trekking? Was it something to do with the weather, or did you have an injury? Did you have an animal encounter? What was the worst thing?
Well, it depend like different accident happens in different region. But mostly in the trekking, lots of people they are affected by the altitude sickness.
Yeah.
And also the weather. Weather is the big thing in the mountain.
Have you ever had an avalanche or anything?
Well, I have seen quite a few times in my life, in trekking life, but I haven't faced, But I saw avalanches in Annapurna region, especially the Annapurna base camp. It's really a danger area because of the avalanche.
Yep.
And sometimes the other region has also got the avalanches. When you go nearby the base camp or nearby the mountains, that time it has a chance to get avalanches. And I think you have here, maybe you hear about in the news.
Yep.
Couple of months ago, we had avalanche in the mountain called Mount Manasulu.
Yeah, I think I read about that.
Yeah, so avalanches is one problem in trekking as well. And weather is the main thing. And sometimes the people who come here to do a trek,
Yeah.
they are very unknown about the trekking trail in Nepal, right? Because it is not paved, somewhere soft stone mud and slippery. So lots of people they also they also fall down and broke legs or hands.
Has that ever happened while you've been guiding?
For me, no.
That's good.
Yeah, because I look after my client very well,
Oh, I know that, so.
Yes.
How have you dealt with this type of weather problem or altitude sickness if something like this happens to a client?
Well, the weather, it is beyond the human limit, right? So we
Of
can't
course.
do anything. So when we had a bad weather before we start a trek, that time, like if we are taking a flight, we wait for the good weather. And in the trekking, if we had a bad weather, we take a rest, in the same place. If it is going to be heavy snowing, or raining, we can continue. But if it is heavy snowing, so that time we can take a rest, or we stop somewhere, and wait for the good weather. So that is beyond our limit. But altitude is the main problem in altitude sickness.
Yeah.
Is the main problem in the mountain while you go trekking. So that time we see the symptoms of the altitude and deal with that.
So what kind of clothing and gear would you recommend for trekking, in particular like trekking Everest Base Camp, for instance?
For that, it depends like in which season you are doing a trek, especially, right? But the most famous season in Nepal are March, April, and October, November. Those are the best time to be in Nepal. And about the clothing, you must need a sleeping bag, down jackets, fleece, warm clothes, warm fleece.
Yep.
Underwear, warm trousers, socks, and proper trekking boot. Gloves, cap,
Definitely.
hat. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all of your advice.
You're very welcome.
Makes me want to come back to Nepal right away.
Oh yeah, maybe next year you can try to come here.
No, I want to for sure.
Congratulations! You've now finished the 9 steps of Sherpa. You are now ready to hit the mountain.